Hello dear polymer clay enthusiast, I'm Michaela and in today's tutorial I want to show you a technique that will allow you to make very beautiful pendants with a holographic effect, and we are going to use image transfer and wow sparkling powders for this. So I've properly condition the polymer clay and I'm working with white polymer clay. White is a great option when you want to transfer image onto polymer clay. And then I used an embossing folder to texture one piece of polymer clay passed through the setting number 2, and I am going to use this for the back of the piece. And then I have prepared the second piece of polymer clay passed on the second setting of my Atlas Best machine. And I've also prepared an image that I printed on a laser printer, and this is an AI generated image that I generated with Creative Fabrica Spark. And here's another example of a clay cabochon that I made using polymer clay, of course, an AI generated image generated with CF Spark. And I used glitters and some resin nail art embellishments, and I used this piece as a focal for my bead embroidered design. And you will find this bead embroidery class and my other bead embroidery and polymer clay classes on Creative Fabrica. And I really like these AI generated images. And I encourage you to take a look and try out your hand at generating such designs, and you can use them to make beautiful clay pieces using the image transfer technique, and they are free for personal and commercial usage. And then I started to dampen the paper, and then when I had this paper slightly dampened with water. You should not add too much water. And then I started to remove the paper fibers, and you have to do this with a very gentle touch because there is a risk of distorting the image or taking off. I had some areas in her hair or where I took too much of the image transfer, but I used a black marker to correct these things. And I also used the marker to accentuate a little bit her eye. And then I used a beautiful shield-like cutter to cut out a beautiful shape for the pendant. Of course, you should use your tools or your fingers to smooth off the edges. And then I decided to use wow embossing glitter sparkle to add more interest to the design. And initially I wanted to add this kind of embossing glitter on the margins, not on her face, but I ended up with glitter on the entire piece. And initially I thought this was a design that I should discard, but then I liked the holographic effect, and this is why I love polymer clay so much. It always surprised me in different ways, in beautiful ways. And I wanted to add a 3D look to the piece, so I've used a little bit of red polymer clay, and I've made a heart-shaped small piece that I placed underneath her hands, and then I decided to make two small heart-shaped pieces and put them in her hair. Again, to add a dimension to the design. But then I ended up not liking this tiny hearts in her hair. And then I used a screw pin because I intend to add more elements to the design. And this at this moment the glitter went all over the piece, and I tried to remove part of it, but it got stuck on the piece. But this gave me the holographic effect that I wasn't looking for, but then I liked it. And then I used the craft knife to make an opening in the bottom of the piece, and I placed a gold color jump ring because I intend to attach dangle elements to the design. And so this is the look from the back. As I said, I ended up taking off the heart-shaped elements that I initially placed into her hair, and I decided to make tiny roses. I thought the piece would look even better with such embellishments. And in order to do so, I used a very small cutter and I cut out 5 round clay pieces, and I placed them one on top of the other, slightly overlapping them. And then I made like a curl from one side to the other. So I formed a tiny rose, and then I used my craft knife to remove part of the bottom because I wanted to have a flat piece, and because I wanted these roses to be smaller, not too large. And I didn't like the way the dress looks at this point, and I decided to use a little bit of red um, oil paint to spice up a little bit the design and make a beautiful dress. And this is the look of the piece before putting it into the oven. And I bake my pieces on a tile wrapped in parchment paper because I'm making the front and the back of the piece in the same time. I also use a disposable aluminum lid pan that I put on top of my pieces, especially for white polymer clay pieces, to protect them from direct heat. And then while my piece is in the oven for 45 minutes, I had the time to make resin components that I intend to use, at least one that I intend to use in the design. And so I've poured small amounts of UV resin in silicone cups, and I've used red pigment, a little bit of red pigment that I mixed well with the resin, and I am going to pour this mixture into beautiful molds that are designed for earring making, but you can make any components that you like. And when working with resin, it is recommended to use gloves to protect your hands, to work in well ventilated areas, and it is also recommended to use rubbing alcohol to clean your tools, and be very careful when working with resin anyway. So for some of the pieces, I used a mixture of red pigment, and for other pieces, I used a mixture of white mica powder, perfect pearls mica powder, and then I've cured the pieces for 5 minutes, and then I flipped the silicone mold on the other side, and I baked them for 5 more minutes, and then I even baked the pieces after taking them out of the mold for 1 minute to be sure that they were fully cured. So after taking the polymer clay pendant out of the oven, I let the clay cool down, and then I've prepared a small amount of UV resin, and I'm pouring the resin out of a silicone cup, but I am also using a brush to spread the resin on top of the pendant. Do not put too much resin, if not you will end up with resin drippings. And I usually put my pieces on top of a metallic cutter. Use a heat gun to remove any air bubbles, and then I'm going to put the piece under the UV lamp for 5 minutes. And while the resin is curing, I've used 800 grit sanding paper and water to sand a little bit the resin components and make sure that they don't have rough edges. And now it's time to put together all the elements into a beautiful design. So I decided to add 3 dangle elements in the bottom of the piece, and in order to do so, I'm using beautiful head pins. I'm using beautiful gold color head pins. I'm putting a glass bead, and then a glass seed bead and a roundel bead, roundel crystal bead, and more tiny and more seed beads, red glass seed beads. And then I used pliers to make a loop. I straightened the wire, um, and then attached it to the jump ring that I inserted into the pendant, and then used the pliers to close the jump ring. I will do the same for the red resin element that I am going to attach on top of the pendant. So I used a gold jump ring to attach it to the pendant. And this is the finished pendant, and I hope that you like this idea, and I encourage you to subscribe to my channel if you are not already subscribed, and press the like button if you liked it. Thank you, and stay tuned for more inspiration for work with polymer clay.